morning and welcome. Patriot Radio News Hour. Joe and Jason, the first show in 2024. I hope you guys had a great New Year's. It is, the third day of January. Jason and I took an extra day there yesterday. But I had a bunch of traffic at my house. So yesterday we had about half of the traffic left yesterday. Got some more leaving today, another one leaving tomorrow. Then things eventually by this weekend get back to normal at my house. I think it's one of those things when you live in a state that has better weather in the wintertime. You get more people wanting to come see you. I'm not going to lie about it. I have no desire to go see somebody whose weather's going to be, 10, 15, 20 degrees. No thanks. I'll pass on that. Maybe we go skiing once in a blue moon. And I'm just, I'll say this. I skied a lot when I was younger. I enjoyed it. I have no desire to even do that now. At 53 years old, skiing has lost its appeal for me. So I'll just stay where it's warmer. But our toll-free number, 800-951-0592. The website at allamericangold.com. And, Jason, it's already hump day. Right, it's already Wednesday, second straight week with the short weeks for us. I don't know what I'm going to do next week when I got to work 5 whole days.
Well, I'm just thinking stuff's going to be there to talk about. How's that? there's going to be more and more to talk about as the days move on in 2024. So it shouldn't be that difficult.
I feel like a millennial. I'm going to complain next week about having to work 5 whole days in a row, but there's going to be plenty to talk about. We're going to get some Fed minutes, and it's going to be interesting to see. Remember, we had the big jump in equities. We had a big jump in gold prices. We had a big drop in bond yields with the Fed meeting. Remember the press conference, Jay Powell was super dovish, was talking about, hey, rate cuts, didn't say we could never raise rates again. He didn't say that, but he said it's not our base scenario. More rate hikes, not the base scenario. Of course, remember the dot plot, right? Everyone said, hey, there's going to be rate cuts, and most of the Fed members said there was going to be multiple rate cuts. Going to be interesting to see if the Fed minutes actually match what Jay Powell said and what the dot plot said. I think that's going to be interesting in itself. But the realization that's happened over the last 2 days is, well, wait a minute. The data hasn't been that bad. And what data are we talking about? Probably mostly jobs and consumer spending, right? Those are probably the 2 big data points when you think about what's really, really important. Are people working, and are they spending money? And Jason, at least on those 2 data points, none of those, at least yet, have signified that we're going to get multiple rate cuts. So I think Wall Street, at least for the start of 2024, pulling back a little bit on the euphoria of all these rate cuts, and wants to see some of these, those 2 particular data points get worse before they kind of price it all in.
Yeah, we'll see how the data comes out. I mean, I was watching Mike Rowe about a week ago. He had a guy on his podcast, economics professor, and this guy was saying, look, but before COVID, there was 4 million men aged 18 to 45 that were simply just out of the workforce. They're not considered unemployed. They're just out. And he said, after the so-called recovery of COVID, there's now 7 million men between 18 and 45. It's just not being represented in the unemployment numbers, Joe. And I see a lot of economic stress, especially for small businesses around here. TGI Fridays surprisingly just closed in Longmont. No warnings, just closed yesterday. along with 36 others across the country. So it's tightening up, Joe. I don't know what data points they need to look at, but it's definitely getting ready to be really rocky in 2024.
Well, we're going to see how this all plays out, and that's what we'll watch. We did get some economic data points this morning, job openings, mortgage demand, and then also ISM manufacturing, and all of those were worse. ISM manufacturing farther into well, not farther, but still into negative territory. Anything below 50, it was a 47.4. They were kind of pretty much in line. Demand eased, though, when you looked at, there's certain things more important than others. New orders, the biggest thing, right? Hey, are you getting new orders? That actually contracted at a faster rate, so that wasn't a positive. The backlog, a backlog of stuff. Hey, how backed up are you? And that's also in contraction territory. They're really deep in it, like a 40, which means, hey, we don't have a lot of backlog. So those two things were not great there. And then job openings, a big drop in job openings. So that's kind of the first thing on jobs. They're saying that job openings slid to a 3-year low. That's something we kind of expected, didn't we? That we'd start to see those job openings sliding here. We'll be back. Patriot Radio News Hour. 800-951-0592. A quick look in at the markets here. The Dow's down 250. The S&P's down 30. The Nasdaq's down 100 plus. A lot of that Apple iPhone sales slowing. We got gold's down 30. Silver's down 75 cents. And the 10-year note threatening 4%. So we got the yields rising on the 10-year note. Again, kind of playing along with, hey, I think right now we're going to be in the prove it stage. Prove to us that rate cuts are coming. This is kind of what I've been arguing all along, which is for rate cuts to happen, things got to get a lot worse. That's usually not things that you would see being celebrated with higher stock prices and things of that nature. In 2024, I have no idea. There's a lot of years where I'm pretty confident, hey, I think this is about how it's going to go. I'm pretty confident, that we're going to see this and that. And this year, I really don't know. It's going to be, I think it's going to be a mess. It's an election year, and obviously the Trump-Biden thing, that's for different shows. Everybody's got an opinion on that and what's going on politically and in the courts. Then, of course, you have what's going on in the economy, and are we going, the boom and bust cycle? That's just what we have. That's what the Federal Reserve kind of decided for us, that this is the new economy, if you will, the booms and the bust and the booms and the bust. We've had a boom right after the last bust. Is the bust coming in 2024? But this is why we talk about diversification all the time. Putting all your money into gold or silver, or putting all your money into stocks, or doing it. That's a bad. Being diversified is the name of the game. And one of those ways to do it, check out YRefi. You get up to 10.25% fixed rate of return. I mean, hey, 10.25%, that's a pretty good rate of return year after year. It's fixed. What does fixed mean? It doesn't change. Well, what if the Dow goes down 5,000 points? Still get 10.25. What if it goes up 5,000 points? Still get 10.25. What if we cut rates 5 times? still 10.25, right? And those are the things you kind of know what you're going to get. Of course, 10.25% up to 5 years. If you do something less than that, well, how about 1 year? They'll give you 6.5%. They don't have fees. The great part, if you need your money back early now, they've always gave you all your principal back. Always. That was always we're just giving your money back. Something happened. We get it. Now they're even going to let you keep some of that interest as well. Check them out, investyrefi.com. That's the word invest, the letter Y, REFY.com. Or call them at 888-YREFI24. And remember, as most of you got to have at least $50,000. You can use an existing IRA. Some of you may be able to use a 401k. So check them out, 888-YREFI24. Jason, this job openings data, this is out of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, so this is a government number. And it's government, I guess. We've had big swings lately, but the overall trajectory has been these job openings have been coming down and coming down and coming down, down 600,000 in the latest number, down to 8.73 million. That's the lowest number in 3 years. And again, I'm not really surprised by that number. When you look at other pieces of this, so that's a big one. How many people out there are posting for jobs? Doesn't mean there's actually 8 million jobs available, but there's somebody saying, hey, we're taking a resume. Then when we look at things like quits, so the government tracks people quitting. How many people are quitting? Usually what we see in a strong jobs market, which is what we've had since COVID, the quit numbers are high because they're confident. I can get a better job. I'm going to quit this job and get a better job, or a job that's going to pay me more money. The number of people quitting their job, a big drop there. So that kind of makes sense, right? It was big drops in job openings. Remember, job openings, gosh, they were what? 10, 12, I think at one point 14 million. Of course, after COVID, right, you expected them to be pretty high. But the number of people quitting jobs, Jason, fell to a 4-year low. So this is the lowest number from February of 2020. So right before really the COVID lockdowns, people less confident now that they can quit their existing job and land a better job. And this is, by the way, this was a November number, so kind of because it's a little delayed. But some interesting data points coming out on the job side today.
Yeah, I think it's going to be increasingly difficult to find a better paying job leaving your current job. That's not what's happening now. What's happening now is hold on to what you got and wait for things to get better. Right now, things are getting worse. I think the thing that should be looked at even closer, Joe, is if you end up having to disconnect from a job, can you get the next job? Right. I know there's jobs out there, but sometimes when things start to get a little, towards the way that they're headed now, getting the next job is going to be the trick. You're talking getting a better paying job. I mean, I know there's guys that do that. They got skills, right? But it seems like a lot of downsizing, a lot of precautions are being taken when it comes to the economics of these companies, Joe.
Yeah, and again, I think it's something where numbers can look any way you want them to. Let me give you an example. Chick-fil-A, it's a pretty popular restaurant, fast food. They've raised their prices 21% over the last 2 years. Now, that would signify, by the way, their first one was 15% in 2022. Remember, when the government was trying to convince us inflation was only, peaked at 9. This last year, Chick-fil-A raised their prices another 6%. And again, what is the government's now trying to convince us that it's only 3%. these are things, Jason, that really are factors in what's going to happen next. Look at student loan repayments. Okay, so that was October? Over 40% of people, this was federal student loans, not private, federal. Over 40% of them are not paying. And the government kind of let out, well, we think that number may rise to 50% after the Christmas holiday. And I think it kind of signifies that there's a lot of pressure out there, at least for people at the lower end of the job spectrum, right? If you're making, $15 an hour, $18 an hour, $20 an hour, life can get pretty hard. And when you're sitting there and talking about, well, how high is inflation or how high isn't inflation? I think what you really need to take a longer look at is look at some of these. I don't care if it's Chick-fil-A, McDonald's, these fast food places, the grocery store. Inflation was a lot higher than what the government said it was.
Yeah, I think the inflation has been high. It was higher some months ago, and it's considered lower, but it's still way higher than it's been. I mean, even by their numbers, even by the Fed's numbers, it's higher than it's been for years and years and years and years right now. So when it comes back, and I really feel, Joe, that it's later this year we're going to see inflation come roaring back. Then the jobs numbers that you're saying, that you're reading off, how dangerously sick they sound, they're going to be disastrous. They're just going to be disastrous. That's all there is to it. It's headed our way, Joe. It's just baked into the cake. It's going to happen. The only question is when.
Yeah, it's unclear, right? There's a lot of things that I think can change very, very quickly. Housing is one of those things, with mortgage rates falling, we expected housing to kind of rebound. It hasn't happened yet. Sales for I'm sorry, I want to make sure I get this right. Yeah, this is mortgage demand. So these are people making an application whether to refi their home or to purchase a home. Refis are up a little bit, obviously, as rates have come down, but applications to purchase a home ended the year 12% lower. Total application volume was down almost 10%. This is a slower time. It's going to be interesting if we see a rebound in housing in the first quarter of 2024. Now that the holidays is over, or are we going to see what we've been seeing, which is, hey, home prices are just too high. Everything else I have to pay, we got to pay our car payments, our insurance payments. We got to pay our health care. We got to pay for this, that, the other, right? Well, college, braces, whatever it is. Are they going to be able to buy these homes? This is another one of those things I think that is unclear for 2024 as far as the economy goes. Is there going to be a bounce in housing? Or are we going to see housing stay down at these really low levels?
Is the Fed going to cut rates when inflation starts to stay hot or even go higher? And then you'll see the price of everything go up. Right, Joe? That's the other thing. Housing going up, well, you can get all excited about housing going up. If the price of a loaf of bread doubles again in 2024, then I guess, okay, the housing market's okay, huh, Joe? Just because the price of your investments go up doesn't necessarily mean everything is okay. That's why we sell gold and silver. When gold goes up, that's great and all, but that means the price of everything else is going up. That's why it's wealth insurance, right, Joe?
Absolutely. And then, of course, over the holiday, the government, for the very first time, the debt now over $34 trillion. Of course, every day, and there's a few exceptions, maybe, tax day in April, but 364, maybe 363 days a year, right? The deficit, it's a new high, but they're kind of celebrating every $1 trillion, aren't they? Oh, here's another trillion. Here's another trillion. And lately, and I know it'll slow a little bit, But the last 2 quarters, the last 6 months of 2023, we added over $2 trillion. That's over $1 trillion every 90 days. Now we'll get a reprieve in the second quarter of this year when taxes, the April tax deadline. But now over $34 trillion. And the question will be, how high can it get before we run into really, really big problems? Right now, there's just warnings, right? We see warnings in the debt auctions. We see warnings with central banks buying physical gold. But I don't know what that number is, right? Is it 40 trillion? Is it 50 trillion? Is it 60 trillion? But the one thing that is certain, the pace here, this is crisis-level pace without a crisis.
Well, Joe, I think we've whether they blame COVID for all this economic stress that started the inflation. It's all COVID's fault. It's kind of the crisis that never ended, isn't it, Joe? 2019 things were going to be a crisis, and then then COVID just happened. It just happened.
Yeah, it just came out and fixed it all. Yeah, that's the crisis level debt without a crisis. Patriot Radio News Hour. We'll be back. 800-951-0592. Patriot Radio News Hour. Joe and Jason, our first show of 2024. $20 gold pieces. We've got gold down 30. Prices coming down with it. $2,250. Buy 10 or more. $2,240. 20 or more. $2,230. Gold right now at $2,040. Silver off 75 cents right now at $23.20. Our toll-free number, 800-951-0592. As once again, everybody's kind of saying, okay, we heard the Fed say, hey, we're probably not going to see any more rate cuts. And a lot of them are saying, hey, or rate hikes, we're probably going to see rate cuts. How many are we going to see? And everyone got a little euphoric. And now they're saying, well, wait a minute, let's have them prove it to us and see it in the data. And, of course, when we look at debt, $34 trillion. And Wall Street had a good year, especially the S&P and the NASDAQ. The Dow did okay, wasn't great, but S&P and NASDAQ had good years. That actually is going to help tax revenue. Tax revenue is actually going to be up for 2023, but yet, Jason, the deficit got worse, and a lot worse. And I don't think we're going to get, and again, I don't know. It's pretty murky for 2024. I don't think we're going to see a great year on Wall Street. And now the job openings, all of a sudden, falling significantly. The quits, I think that's probably more important than the actual open, because the openings, they swing. Did 600,000 jobs really disappear? Probably not. But, some companies probably leave postings up longer than they should. Maybe what happened was a bunch of companies were like, okay, we're going to start laying people off. Hey, take all those job openings down. We weren't actually filling them anyway, but take those down. Right? You don't want to have job openings up when you're announcing layoffs, but I think that quits number is the important one to look at. But as we're over $34 trillion, and as I said, we've been averaging over the last 2 quarters $1 trillion plus a quarter every 90 days. That annualized, that would be $4 trillion. Now, we're not going to run a $4 trillion budget deficit. We're not. Like I said, April, we're going to have some inflush infusion of cash. The question is really going to be, how high is it going to be? Is it going to be $2.5 trillion? Is it going to be $3 trillion? I think a lot of it's going to depend on how strong or weak the economy is. The weaker the economy, Jason, I think that the closer to $3 trillion we get.
2024 is a long year. We could still hit $4 trillion, Joe. There's going to be a lot of spending before now and the end of the year. There is 2 wars going on, right? There's plenty of opportunity for the government to beg to spend, and so $3 trillion I think is almost guaranteed. How's that? $4 trillion I think is still in the cards.
Wow.
Well, I mean, think about it. It's just the first quarter. You got some reprieve, like you said earlier, but that leaves you with 3 more quarters. And what is going to happen? The world does not look like it's spending less. Of course, the debt's not going down. So why not, Joe? Why not? That's where we're headed.
It's heavily subsidized when we think about where we're at right now. And, of course, the money supply is contracting. It's been contracting. But the government continues to spend at a rapid clip. Now, we're a few weeks away from another potential government shutdown. I know we're tired of hearing it, but we've got continuing resolutions. There's been no resolution. Jason talked about the war, right? There is no, that's out there, right? The president wanted, a couple $100 billion for that. Then remember, they broke it up. So this is how bad it's gotten. This is how dysfunctional the United States has become. Talk about these continuing resolutions. That's a budget for 2024, which January, we're in the 4th month of fiscal year 2024, and they don't have a budget. Right? And of course, I'm not hearing anybody talk about actually spending less money, not even the Republicans. There's a few. Maybe the ones that got out McCarthy, maybe they want to actually spend less. But it's all about the size of how much more are we going to spend. And they went to the point that they said, well, some of it we're going to do in January, some of it in February. So even if they do something in January, we're going to talk about another government shutdown in February. I mean, that'll put us 5 months into the year. I mean, this is nonsense. This is not how the greatest country on earth should be running, Jason.
Well, and add on to it that the Fed wants job losses. How are you going to keep the deficit lower when the tax revenue drops down to nothing? They get all the job losses, then you don't have the tax collection that they're wanting, which is probably one of the reasons they hired tens of thousands of IRS agents, because of digital currencies and the economy that's coming and all this other stuff. Well, when you got to put the heat on and collect taxes, you need more tax collectors. And that's another reason, Joe, why I think the deficit could grow much higher towards the end of the year.
When we look at 2023, and I know people hate it, but let's look at it factually versus the number game that they put out. So they said, $1.7 trillion was the added on debt in 2023. That wasn't true. Now, they said $1.3 trillion the year before. That wasn't true. Right? They added a little over $300 billion in 2022 for the debt forgiveness, right? That went out the window. And then they subtracted it in 2023. Here's the realities. From 2022 to 2023, the government spent an extra $1 trillion. When we talk about, well, how did we get all of this GDP growth? Now, a big chunk of that was extra interest. Right? I think it was about $300 billion of that trillion was we just had to pay more interest. But essentially, pretty much all of the growth that we've really actually been seeing is just the government going further into debt. I'm sorry, but that's the reality. And now the problem is, how much more debt can they really go into? Patriot Radio News Hour. We'll be back after the break. 1-800-951-0592. Joe and Jason back here, 2024. $20 gold pieces, 1 through 9, $22.50. 10 or more, $22.40. 20 or more, $2,230 at 800-951-0592. And we're kind of looking at debt here and how big of a problem do we have. And the realities is we're in this period over the last 4 years. The debt has gone up $11 trillion. Now I know there was COVID, and the excuse to pump everything up. Well, how do we explain last year $2 trillion? How do we explain so far in 2024? Already, right, blowing away the deficit numbers that we saw in 2023. So, again, as I told you, the real number was $2 trillion. Of course, you're never going to get them to say that. But if the real number was $2 trillion, well, what's this year's number going to be? And I think this is going to be one of the things that, as we go forward, we're starting to see the cracks, the early signs. When we look at the debt auctions that we have every week. It's pretty much a weekly occurrence now where we said, man, that was a bad one. Some weeks, there's multiple bad ones. And what does bad ones mean? Well, bad ones mean less people came, and even though Wall Street said, let's just use today as an example. So right now, Wall Street says the 10-year note is at 3.956. All right, so let's just round up 3.96. And let's just say there was a 10-year auction today. And who knows however many billion they had to sell $50 billion worth. Well, what we want, and I say we because we want this. Believe me, we do. We want a lot of people to be there. And we would love it if they said, you know what, we'll take $1 billion or $5 billion or whatever it may be. And you know what, we'll take less than 396. Right? That'd be wonderful. That'd be outstanding. But what we've been seeing is, in order to sell it all, there are some people out there, yeah, okay, we'll take $1 billion at 396, and somebody else, yeah, we'll take $2 billion at 3961 and 3962 and 3965, 397, 3975, and by the time they sell it all, they sell all $50 billion, here's what's happened. The tail, as they call it, gets really large. In other words, farther away in the wrong direction from 396. And we really don't know how much farther away, because what ends up happening is the dealers, the banks that do the auctions, they end up buying a large piece of, they're buying 20% of the auction, which is double what they would normally be buying, right? Because they, let's face it, there's reasons for banks to buy treasuries. There are. But not double. And the only reason they're buying it is because the tail's getting so big, right? It gets any bigger, people are going to start what? Right? We got problems here. That's going to upset Wall Street. And Jason, people don't understand this is slow moving. But the problem is here. And the government's solution is, well, guess what? Too bad. We're going to keep adding historical amounts of debt that need to be sold. So it's easy for someone like me or you to say, listen, I think this problem keeps getting worse and not better.
Yeah, Joe, it's the problems with selling treasuries has been bad for a while now. So I know that the yields came down. I know it kind of looked good for a while. You mentioned it's trying to get back up to 4, but I think there's once again it's not looking good. I'm going to keep going back to it like a broken record. Inflation is not going to make this work. This whole monetary system is not going to work. They printed 40%. I've even heard numbers as high as 80% of all the money that's currently 2024 in circulation was printed in 2020. But during the year of 2020, they printed 40% of all the circulating money in this country was printed that year for the so-called emergency of COVID, the shutdowns that should have never happened. And here we are, 2023, we're still talking about all the economic mess, which, to tell you the truth, it wasn't COVID's fault either. 2019, it was showing that the stuff that happened during the 08 housing crash was still just getting ready to bubble up. They kicked the can really hard down the road after 2008 through 2010, and there wasn't really any growth. I still remember all the Obama years of the anemic so-called growth of 1% a year, right? They never fixed it, and they're not going to have growth now. Maybe we'll talk about it on the Happy to Cup of Joe, but there's just a lot of factors that shows that America is not in an economically good situation, and I don't see how they're going to dig themselves out. We're looking like Japan, Joe, especially if the world stops spending dollars and we de-link at some level the world reserve currency. And we already kind of lost that anyways. What are we? We're a percentage of the world reserve currency now, right? 90% of it isn't dollars now. What is it, like 69%? Not going to get better, Joe.
Depending on where you look at, what metric you use, that number, most of the numbers now, we just dipped below 60 on most of the big important numbers. Yep. We'll be back, though. Final segment of the first show of 2024 coming up next. Final segment, Patriot Radio News Hour, Joe and Jason. $20 gold pieces 1 through 9, $22.50. 10 through 19, $2,240. 20 or more, $2,230. And there's certain things too to watch for, right? One of the things, Jason, and I think rightfully so. Hey, I'm worried inflation's coming back. The Fed is claiming victory mostly because of how they calculate inflation versus what the actual rate of inflation is, but that this potentially claiming victory too early is going to reach another leg in inflation. There's a lot of people in that camp. One of the things that I look at, silver falls into this, copper. I think these two metals are going to be very, very important when we get into are we going to see this rebound in inflation? Analysts now saying that copper could grow 75% in the next 2 years, pushing copper to new all-time record highs. And they're saying that obviously, green energy, all that stuff, the second half of 2024, they're anticipating a BMI. They're anticipating all new record high copper prices. They said that, hey, it's more than just, hey, we think the dollar's going down, right? Whether there's going to be dollar, I think that's a trend for 2024. Why are people thinking gold and silver are going to have a good 2024? They think the dollar's going to get weaker. Same reason, it's funny. I think it's the same reason some people think stock market's going to do okay. Hey, the dollar's going to get weaker. But at Bank of America, they said, well, you know what? For copper, that's a part of it. But the other part is the growing deficits and talking about how much more, whether it's copper, silver, this is the same argument on both of these metals. Jason, really low supply and high levels of demand. And this is going to be an interesting case study here because, obviously copper, silver as well, it's in so many things that we do, could really have a negative impact on the inflation has been fixed.
Yeah, I learned about copper before I joined Patriot. I used to go through boxes of pennies and pull out the copper ones because there was 2 cents worth of copper in each 82 or older penny, just like the 64 and older silver. They had to eliminate the copper out of the pennies because it was too expensive to make the pennies, Joe. And I think it's closer to 3 cents for a copper penny now. And copper is very much more of an industrial metal than silver is. Mostly because copper's a little cheaper, right, Joe? Copper getting more expensive, silver is going to get more expensive, and that means everything else just gets, obviously, Joe, more expensive. So, yeah, I used to watch copper really closely, Joe. It's very bulky. I don't advise you to be bulking up on copper because it'll take up a whole basement, Joe, just to do what gold can do in a shoebox, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, that'd be a lot of room, wouldn't it? 800-951-0592. By the way, 2 of the largest copper producers in the world say copper production's on its way down in 2024, in 2025. So a lot of factors at play. We'll be back with a half-empty cup.